have full code zoning. The Anchorage 2020 plan, which was adopted in 2001, and the Anchorage 2040 plan, which was adopted last year, call this land, all of it, 100% of the property, to be I2 zone, and it is part of the industrial reserve. Preserving industrial lands is, for industrial uses, is a high priority of the community. It's backed up by the industrial lands study. We found that we need more industrial land and that it's vibrant to a local economy. Industrial lands create new money. That's the idea of taking something from nothing and creating something, raw materials to finished products. This split zoning is unique and quite odd, but may have made sense in a weird way at the time during the original area-wide rezonings, because the old zoning code didn't have a lot of protections, or had fewer protections for the lesser intense residential zoning from the industrial zoning. However, our new code, our current code, specifically addresses this situation. There's 100 feet of right-of-way on 92nd Avenue. Site perimeter landscaping would be required for, with development of the property. One of the issues that has been commented on by members of the public is that, there's a plan for a school site. There was intended to be a school site. We've talked with Anchorage School District and the Heritage Land Bank. There's no school planned for or ever to be on the property abutting this lot. Also, there's no eagle nesting on the property. That was another issue that was brought up. As far as access, there's good access to 92nd Avenue, which goes out to C Street. Access to C Street is prohibited. There's a painted median on 92nd Avenue, which would need to be shortened up in order for trucks to make the turn into the property. But that is access is not an issue. Now, the R2M zoning, that 70 feet, 69 feet on the north side of the site, will never be developed with residential. That's not going to happen. The I2 land, however, will be developed. This property will be developed with industrial uses, regardless of what happens with this application. Both the Planning and Zoning Commission.
I have a question from Ms. Alto.
You'd mentioned some, thank you, Mr. Chair. You'd mentioned some public input, and when I explored the documents we had in the packet, I noticed that this really started in 2017. I want to talk a little bit about the process before we get to the particulars. Do we have, has the proposed location been reassessed since 2017? Has there been more notice gone out to the public and community councils? Because it seems to have stopped in 2017 and now it's back before us. Can you kind of fill me in on the process and what you guys have done to make sure everything that happened in 2017 is either still applicable or appropriate, and that the public's been involved in this process? In particular, I'm interested in traffic's analysis because it signed off in 2017. Did it look again recently? But that's kind of what I'd like a little bit of information about.
Yes, that's an excellent question. So the public process and the public notification. So the applicant was required by code to have a community meeting that was advertised to all the neighbors. They had that. They submitted their rezoning case. It went before the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the Planning and Zoning Commission, it was noticed again there's posters put on the property. There was a legal advertisement. We mailed public hearing notices again to all the properties within a 500-foot radius. In the file, I can tell you how many hundreds of mailers went out. So Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of the elimination of this split zoning with a number of special limitations. Planning Department had recommended additional special limitations over and above what our current code provides as protections to the neighborhood. So there were additional restrictions put on the property. You have to, it's for a 6 or 8 foot berm, I can look at it. 6 foot berm with landscaping on top of it. That access only be from 92nd Avenue and never to use Vernon Street. So there was landscaping, there was about the truck route, there was the berm, there may be some other special limitations in there. So that recommendation for approval sat because we had a retirement in our office, and it wasn't forwarded to the assembly expeditiously. It just sort of got lost in the shuffle, paperwork. For this public hearing and this decision, it was mailers went out again as per what is required. Signs are at the site. The legal ad was done. It was introduced more than 21 days ago, and now we have a public hearing on Tuesday. So the public process and the code required notice has all taken place.
Did planning go back and look at those things that had previously signed off on to make sure it was still applicable, though, since a couple of years have lapsed? Because that residential neighborhood, the uses could have changed, traffic could have increased depending on who those occupants are. Those impacts that there's several memos in the packet, traffic, planning, everyone kind of signs off. Do you go back and take another look when something sits for this long?
Well, rezones take a long time. This is not, atypical. This one sat a little bit longer between Planning and Zoning Commission and coming to you. I did another site visit.
Just you, though, not traffic, not the other.
Well, the site hasn't changed between then and now.
The site might not have, but the site doesn't sit in a vacuum. The site sits within a neighborhood with a lot of people and lots of traffic and cars and other things occurring.
So I would take issue with how you're characterizing this. So it's a well-established residential neighborhood, and the property on all other sides is undeveloped, and the road, the properties. I can't think of how it's changed in a year.
Okay.
I think from Dave Whitfield, Planning Department, from planning's perspective, the circumstances revolving around this case have not changed. The applicant's representative here just leaned over and said that they've been working with the traffic department on the grading plan, on the wetlands plan. So it's not as though the traffic department hasn't been involved in the process since 2017. They've been actively involved in the permitting process through the applicant. And as I said before, I think that the planning department's position is the circumstances revolving around the case and the neighboring properties have not changed.
Okay, just one last follow-up.
Sure.
Is there a mechanism within your procedures, and I'm new, so just kind of educate me here a little bit, when something does sit for a while to kind of trigger back into those? I appreciate that mailers went out again and all of that, but to the community councils, there was at least one community council that had some pretty significant objections, and I feel like they're kind of like the ear to the ground. So, while you say it's an established neighborhood, they're hearing from those folks, month after month. So is there something that triggers kind of getting back to them?
The only notification that happens to the community council is when the original application is sent. We take copies of the application and send them to all the different municipal and state reviewing agencies. We send it to the Federation of Community Councils, and we send it to the community councils where the property is, and that was the notification that the community council received. I'd have to look and see whether or not the Bayshore Clat Community Council provided comments at the time.
It was the Chaco Campbell, actually, Community Council that's nearby that provided comment. So they obviously caught wind of it. They, had something to say about it. So I didn't see anything from Bayshore Class.
My guess, I don't have the map in front of me, but I think that the community council boundary would probably lie on Diamond Boulevard. I could be wrong. And this is on 92nd Avenue.
It actually kicks over a little bit.
It does,
I mean,
okay.
it's really, you're talking about a budding area here. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so we mail to a community council where the property lies, plus any community councils that are within 1,000 feet of the petition site.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hotel. Before I turn it back to you, Mr. McLaughlin, just want to note, I think we have some members of the audience who wish to speak, and so what we're going to do is do this presentation, and then if we have members of the audience, we'll turn it over to them. Go ahead, Mr. McLaughlin.
Just two last comments. So the neighbors submitted a petition protesting the rezoning, which means that instead of a majority of the assembly, 6 votes required to approve the elimination of split zoning, it will take 8 positive votes. So there was that, and then I can't remember my other point, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, sure. So I think we have a member of the audience who lives close to this site who wants to speak.
Yeah, I do. I just wanted to provide some clarifying information.
Sure. Actually, if I may, Mr. Gates.
I would just like to remind you, there's an exclusion. The story needs we will look at the exclusion of the line one. The corrections still necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. Go ahead, and if you could say your name for the record, please.
Sure. It's Jacqueline LaFrance. I live in the neighborhood. I do not live within the distance that requires you to be notified, so I wasn't, but I am in contact with the people who live directly across the site, and the first we heard of it was my own follow-ups, emailing planning and zoning, hey, 2 years have dragged on, when are we going to hear about this? So, so the neighborhood itself falls within Taku Campbell, and the actual site would fall within the Bayshore Community Council. So Bayshore was notified first, and then Taku Campbell. Both community councils signed during the 2-year ago planning and zoning portion resolutions opposing the rezoning because of safety issues with access to the site. A big part of the problem is that they're not going to just use 92nd because it actually isn't possible without completely blocking off people's houses for large trucks to enter this. Even if you repave that median, unless you remove a fire hydrant too, which is on the site, because in order to make that turn, that fire hydrant is going to be in the way. I mean, I'm interested to see how they'll be able to do it, but if you look at that map, which is up there, it's the small square there right on C Street, and 92nd that's requesting the rezone, and then you have a wetland, and then you have neighborhood, and then south to it where it says I-2 on the map is a sediment pond and utility holdings. So really what you're talking about is residential area all to the west, residential area all to the north. Heritage Land Bank 2 years ago said that they were holding those lands in reserve for undevelopment. The school that was supposed to be up there in 1986 when they made that plan isn't happening. So I know a lot of residents, myself included, are disappointed to hear that, but things change. But it didn't bode well that sign was up there for 20 plus years, allowing people to buy homes in that neighborhood thinking that's what that land was going to get developed for. And then in coincidence with the development of this site, the sign comes down. So that was frustrating. But they have no plans of developing that site according to their meeting 2 years ago, because they're holding these Class A's as bargaining chips for being able to develop lower Class C, wetlands. And so really you're talking about this tiny little piece of property that is going to change, that doesn't fit in with anything else that's going to happen, and is going to completely change the access of that neighborhood.
Thank you. I think I have some questions for you. Ms. Zalatelli.
Can you point, thank you, Future. Where's the wetland? I'm sorry, I'm a little bit confused
So
about that.
directly to the west of that property, so on that,
In the
that is a
Archway
Class
box.
A Heritage Land Bank wetland. And then the one directly to the south is Class B, with no plans for that to be developed. So that square is what will become an industrial piece amongst all the neighborhood.
Thank you, Ms. Zalatelli. Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I remember reading something about that there might be additional truck traffic on Vernon Avenue. Is that right?
In order for them to access and clear the site when they did it, they came down 88th, which I'm not sure if you can see on there. But so north of this neighborhood is 88th, and then they came down Vernon and then onto 92nd to access the street. And I have photos with me of all the trucks when they did that, if anyone would like to see them. But it was not possible for them to access this from C Street and 92nd. I went down and pulled their permit, And their haul route made no mention of coming through a neighborhood to do that. It said C Street to 92nd, but that's not what they did because you can't do it.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Dyson.
Yeah, maybe I missed it. Can you tell me a little bit about what's east of the C Street there? You're across C Street from this property?
That's Freight Line Trailer Craft.
Yeah, so it is industrial over there.
Yeah, it's all industrial.
Across C Street, right? Thank you.
And then Cabela's and Target further south. You know, that's the region that we're in right there. It's industrial lands, and then as you get closer to O'Malley, you get to
refresh my memory. Under this rezone, what's the upper limit of the kind of industrial use that could be consistent with the zoning?
So the I-2 heavy industrial is the most industrial district we have. However, our current code has required separation distances from residential districts, which would ixnay some of the industrial uses that would otherwise be allowed. We have use-specific standards, so everything that a person would want to do on their property is listed in our Title 21 code book, our land use zoning regulations, and then it says if you want to do this, this is what it requires. So it might require a conditional use permit, or it may be prohibited because it's too close to the residential district. It may require more landscaping, fences. It just kind of depends on what you want to do.
Yeah, including acoustic. Couldn't be.
They'll always have to comply with the noise ordinance, Title 15.
Yeah, and then visual barriers.
Yeah.
As appropriate. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dyson. Oh, Mr. France.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, for the record, let me mention that Ms. LaFrance is a relative and not a member of my immediate family. And then to Ms. LaFrance, you mentioned your primary concern has to do with safety and traffic. And if that were resolved, if there was a way to address that so that traffic would not come through the neighborhood, would you be supportive of this?
Well, the fact of the matter is that street is neighborhood. 92nd Street, 92nd Avenue, people's driveways back up directly onto that street. So that's not possible because C Street is a limited access road. So there would be someone in that neighborhood whose safety and access would be greatly compromised by this. And I mean, in the construction, I have absolutely no faith that it would not happen, that it would not come down those streets. Right? I mean, unless we want to pay for a cop to sit there the entire time because when I tried to even discuss it with them, it was like a joke. Like no one cared, and they just parked right there in the median in the yellow and the double stripes, like it was no big deal. So.
Thank you, Mr. France. Ms. Alto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When in the proposed zoning map amendment, it says vehicular access to residential streets is prohibited. I presume that means Vernon Street.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me a little bit about enforcement for the residents if they're seeing access occur down the street? How does that play out?
Yeah, there's a zoning code enforcement hotline, 343-4141, and they take calls and then they send out the zoning police to issue citations.
Would you have to see the vehicles on the road, using the road, in order to issue a citation, or would you have to see the truck going down Vernon Street, or because I could see that by the time you get there, the truck is gone?
Through the chair, Ms. Dalzell, I think I'm actually quite familiar with zoning enforcement as I used to be in that department. You have to have evidence. So if the neighborhood saw, and let's just say they videotaped and provided that to zoning enforcement, they could issue fines, up to $300 a day. So that's typically how it's handled. But certainly you have to have evidence to suggest that occurred, that violation occurred.
I have one related question for you, Mr. Chair. Ms. LaFrance, can you tell me a little bit, based on what you know of that neighborhood, are there lots of kids? Like, tell me about the activity in the neighborhood, particularly on Vernon Street and those cross streets.
On Vernon itself, there's no sidewalks in this neighborhood. So walking on the road is the only way to access it as a pedestrian. On Vernon itself, you have driveways that back on to Vernon, and then you also have a daycare, at least one daycare on Vernon. You have a daycare on 88th. Those were both streets that the trucks use. When I called that hotline, I was told you just have to call the police. Like, that was the response that I got. But and I have photos of them driving on that road. But and then so there's a lot of kids in that neighborhood. It's zoned for Campbell Elementary, buses that come and pick up kids on every single block, or that live on every block.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Alatel. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you. And looking at the lot in the area south of the proposed zoning change area, is that currently owned by the business right now?
Directly south of the full square, not just the rezone. Yeah, the entire square that's on there, and then the little hash parts. The hash part is the 69-foot berm that they want to rezone, and then the whole square is owned by the applicant.
Well, is it possible to put a different entrance here toward the southern end of that lot so the trucks wouldn't have to drive on 92nd? Is that possible, or what would we have to go through to make that?
It'd be prohibited by the Alaska State Department of Transportation. It's like a freeway or something. There'll never be access from this property onto C Street directly. It'll always have to go through 92nd Avenue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Any more questions for Ms. LaFrance? Okay, thank you so much. Are there any other members of the public who live near this petition site who would like to testify? Please come forward and state your name for the record.
My name is Dale Davenport, and I live on Vernon Street. And some of these statements that he was making are incorrect. The community council has not received a notification recently. I have gotten no notice that any of the neighbors have received any notification. I took my dog for a run down there last night, and there were no new signs that have been posted recently, considering this new hearing for the rezone. In regards to the industrial traffic on Vernon Street or Residential Street, I was told that you have to get their DOT ID number, and I can tell you from experience that is very difficult to do because you're not like walking around with a video camera playing all the time, and the traffic is going so fast. So it's difficult to actually get evidence of these industrial vehicles on your residential street, aside from eyewitnessing and being able to record the numbers difficult. And the boundary for the community council is on 92nd Avenue, and so the Taku Campbell Community Council should have been notified as well, and both community councils put in protests or opposition to this. So.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Davenport? Thank you so much. Any other residents who live near the petition site who would like to testify? Are you the petitioner, sir?
Yes, I'm representative of the petitioner.
Sure.
Just some clarification.
If you could state your name on the record, please.
David Grittier, Pride Engineering. And since the planning and zoning heard the case back in 2017, what's occurred since then is the rating plan was submitted to the municipality, went through the process, which took just shy of a year, and also a wetlands permit was submitted to the Corps of Engineers, and that process took over a year. So those activities have taken place. And one note about traffic that was brought up during the grading plan permit was a comment, advisory permit, or comment that they made that says, quote, when the site is developed, there will be a requirement for a sidewalk to be installed along 92nd Avenue property line and a driveway that meets commercial landing requirements from municipal driveway standards. So that's directly from the traffic department. So they have addressed, whenever a site plan for the development goes to the municipality for review, this will be a requirement. And one other thing, as far as the trucks that did get onto Vernon, one suggestion we had is possibly putting a sign. Basically, a lot of these truck drivers don't know when you're getting into a type of neighborhood, it's not allowed. So this would be something that we would be open to doing. If you want to make it part of the rezone, it may be more appropriate as part of the site plan review process and the driveway permit process. Questions?
Yeah, I have a question from Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And one of the testifiers earlier mentioned that there was a fire hydrant in this area.
Yes.
And is that going to need to be moved? And I mean, we obviously don't want a truck running over that fire hydrant. That would cause a major problem.
Yeah. The proposed location we have does not require relocating a fire hydrant. In fact, the berm, the 6-foot berm landscaping lawn that we submitted to the planning department that was approved shows the potential location for this driveway, and it did not require relocation of streetlights, but there's a number of streetlights along there as well, and then there's also fire hydrants that will not require relocation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Perez-Verdia.
I'm sorry, I may have missed this in the beginning, but can you briefly just explain what the activity is going to be on this site? What is going to be happening on this site?
At this point, it's not the actual activity has not been determined.
Okay.
So the first thing that had to occur before we can actually come up with the land use is this strip of land, this R2. How do we deal with this?
So the trucks coming and going that were referred to was to develop the site.
It was for the clearing of the property only. There was no grubbing that occurred. It was just for the clearing material.
And then the comments earlier about trucks being able to access this site, is it in your intention that large trucks will be utilizing this site?
Very much so. Now the final use, let's say it's a self-storage unit complex, maybe not the large trucks that you would see as across the street. So there's a number of different things that have been proposed. But at this point, we need to get the land use squared away. Another major hurdle was the wetlands permit, and the third major one was the actual grading permit. We've gotten the wetlands permit from the Corps of Engineers now. We have the grading permit from the municipality, and this is the third leg of the project.
Just one final, just you gave an example. Can you just give us a few examples of what is the type of activity would have? Would it be a self-storage, or what are other kinds of activities?
That's allowed. Francis, there's an entire list.
I mean,
Yeah, some of them wouldn't be possible because of the proximity to residential, but in Chapter 5 of the zoning code, it lists the industrial uses, and I could tick those off. They include commercial food production, cottage crafts, general manufacturing, heavy manufacturing, light manufacturing, aquaculture, impound yard, motor freight terminal. That's not those. I'm pretty sure would be eligible. Outdoor storage, storage yard, self-storage, warehouse light, compost, junkyard and incinerator. I'm sure that those wouldn't. I think they have 1,000-foot separation distance requirements. And even though 92nd Avenue is 100-foot wide, you still wouldn't meet the separation distance from the residential neighborhood to the north. Recycling drop-off, snow disposal site, solid waste transfer facility. Many of these require conditional use permits.
Which is a public
that's good.
process, a public hearing process. And then
Thanks.
there's the site plan process
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Some would raise to the, would either be an administrative site plan review, and some of these types of uses would raise to a full public hearing.
I hit most of them. There's contractors, specialty trades, light, data processing facilities, dry cleaning establishment, general industrial service, and government service.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Whittleton.
Go ahead.
I have a couple, if I can. And maybe a comment too, but it's real common in rezones. People want to know what's it going to be used for. And it's dishonest for anyone to say. He'd be lying to us if he said, we're going to do X. Because they can sell it tomorrow and someone else can come in and rezone, it's just a rezone. But in this one in particular, so I know, and maybe this would be the staff as well, but if we don't rezone, because it is I-2, except for one little strip of land, and then one person owns the whole thing, it's one lot, but it's split zone. So were there, this rezone of that little strip of land not done, would he be able to use that property?
Would he be able to use?
That's a yes/no question.
Well, as far as R2, you cannot subdivide it because of the depth of the lot.
Right, but could he use that property?
Can use the property, not for I2 purposes.
He couldn't use,
No.
but he could use I2, right?
Yeah,
could
he
use
he could use the property. I
Right.
mean, the reasoning behind keeping it R2 was to provide that
Right,
buffer
understood.
between
I
that
understand.
higher intensity I2 and that residential.
I understand.
So yes, he could definitely use the
So
property.
you can use that property for I2 purposes. If this is no rezone, that was a yes. If there's no rezone, would there still be traffic going in there to use that property? Or would it solve their problem? If there's no rezone, there's no traffic, they're happy.
The property will be used as I2 because the only access is off the 92nd. C Street is not an option.
Right.
It's
Okay.
basically it's closed off.
Okay, so if there's no rezone, the property owner can use that, he's allowed access to it, we can't deny him access. He can use it for I2 purposes, bringing in large trucks potentially. So if there's no rezone, the neighborhood still has these issues, even if we deny this rezone. Okay? So my understanding with the rezone, same traffic, they use it for I2, but because of the rezone's requirements, they get a true buffer. They get a 6-foot berm that is landscaped. Now there is no buffer there. So with no rezone, they have the same traffic, same uses, no buffer. With the rezone, same traffic, same uses, they're a pretty nice buffer. A 6-foot berm with buffering landscaping, and it's 40 feet wide, which is exceptional really in the world of buffering. So to me, I look at this and it's a win for the neighborhood. No rezone, they have all their problems with no benefit. With the rezone, they get a true buffer. Now it's a stinker to have I2 next to the neighborhoods. I mean, this is a bummer, but it is where we are. But dealing with that, it seems to me this is a win for the neighborhood, but they're not quite seeing that.
That was the logic of the planning and zoning commission. Exactly.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Whittleton. Mr. Peters.
Thank you. Now, I was just wondering, we're talking about the rezoning area being just over half an acre. How many acres is the rest of that lot? Is that 2 acres, 2.5?
4.
Four.
It's the whole parcel is essentially 5.
5 acres. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, and I apologize if this was answered before. I had a thing with the National Guard I had to resolve. So I get the logic of what Mr. Weldon is saying, but then it begs the question: why are you doing this? I understand why the city wants to do this. I want to understand why the neighborhood might want this, but berms and landscaping is not cheap. Why not just leave this, on paper buffer that doesn't have a lot of actual impact and just use the rest of it as I2 and save the money? Why bother to do the stuff that we're going to force you to do in terms of neighborhood improvement?
Well, there's the question, one of the questions that we had during the whole process was, can you have a use on a piece of property that's split zone. And we've had other situations where we've been told, no, you have to have. If you're going to have a project on a piece of ground, it cannot be split zone. Now, that was when we were going through the process.
No, they would be able to develop the I-2 property. What would be different? I think its special limitation is for 40 feet of planting bed and a 6-foot berm within that.
Yeah.
That's less than 69 feet. So they gain 20 feet of use of the property.
Okay.
I think that's probably the only benefit to the developer. I just wanted to add that Mr. Weddleton's comment, there is a special limitation prohibiting access to Vernon Street too. So it'll be a zoning special limitation that doesn't allow truck traffic on that. So that is something the zoning police can get involved in.
So I guess that all makes sense, but I guess I kind of don't understand why you guys did this, because we're going to impose a lot of really expensive requirements on you. You get 20 feet more of usable I-2. It seems like not a good trade for you, but thank you for offering to build all this stuff for the neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Weddleton.
I had one other thing. If you go through this too, they're old, but the opposition from the neighborhood, from the community councils, I think their key point was, to do the rezone, it should reflect a plan, a land use document, which 2 years ago we did not have, but now we do, and it's that land use 2040 plan we passed last year, and it specifies this should be industrial. So kind of really the most substantial comment that the community councils had was that's resolved now.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Ms. Solitaire.
Thank you, through Chair, to Mr. Weddleton, actually. I think that's one of the issues I had with regard to notice, going back out to the community councils. 2 years is a long time. If we're going to have a robust public process, I would have liked to have re-noticed these community councils and re-engaged in this discussion. I understand that a rezone takes a long time, but we've got to balance those processes so that they can timely respond with current information. If I may, Mr. Chair, I'm a little bit map challenged. I will admit that. Can someone explain to me, I understand that C Street goes south. Can you show me how the trucks not using Vernon Street should come, where are they coming from? So they're only coming from the north to the south. Would they ever be coming the opposite way up Arctic?
No, so access for this property will always be from a driveway placed about here onto C Street. I spoke with the traffic engineer
They always have
for
to
this
go out
meeting.
and go south and then find another route back north?
That's a signalized is it a signalized intersection? I can't remember.
Isn't it a one-way street?
It is not a signalized so they have to come southbound in. Well, there's probably a turning lane here. Okay, so you can go, if you're going north, you can go left. If you're going south, you can go, it would be right for you. From here, you can only go southbound.
Is this, are we far enough, sorry, are we far enough south we're on the big split on C then? Because I thought C was one way. Sorry guys, I really apologize.
Yeah, freight lines here. When I was out there walking the site, I just don't remember looking at what was going on here. But what you have is a concrete median for a few feet, and then you have a painted median for the rest of it. But I talked with the traffic engineer. I said, "Is access to the property a problem?" And she said to me that the painted median might need to be shortened, but that's the only issue. And I don't know if Mr. Grenier said they have a commercial driveway permit already, or is that something you're going to do?
It's something we will need to do.
So they'll have to apply for a commercial driveway permit. It would be permitted by the right-of-way division and the traffic engineer. There's a process for that. When you want to put in a driveway, you have to apply for that, show where it's going to be. It's evaluated by the traffic department.
Yeah, it is two-way. Thank you, Ms. Quinn Davidson. It's down where it splits, larger and wider. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Solitaire. Right. Any further questions on this one? All right. Anything further, Mr. McLaughlin?
No, I mean, thank you for the opportunity. I mean, I think that the planning department, agrees with the concerns of the neighborhood, and that's why we recommended these special limitations that we believe address their issues. And that's why the Planning and Zoning Commission adopted them that way. One other thing about the notice, the neighbors have signed a petition and submitted a protest of this, so they're acutely aware of Tuesday's meeting. You're going to see people not testify.
Thank you. Mr. Whittleton?
2 questions. One, is there any way we can legally stop this from being used for I-2 and legally stop the owner from having access from I-2?
No way. It's going to be developed with it is I-2 zone property, it's privately owned, and to my understanding, it will be developed for industrial uses. That is going to happen regardless of, if this totally went away and you guys didn't even act on the case, that's going to happen.
So we can't say this is a neighborhood street, you can't access off of it, tough luck.
Well, it wouldn't make sense to. So the special limitation proposed in the ordinance is to limit access to the arterial road, 92nd Avenue, and to prohibit access to Vernon Street.
So we can't tell him he can't access his property. That's not legal for us to do.
Yeah, even the Department of Transportation allow if there's no other access. What they want is access from side streets because it's a safer access rather than going directly out onto whatever classification C Street is.
So then,
major arterial.
From Mr. Grenier, would it be a problem? If we maybe hear this, but then say we want to give notice to community councils, we're going to have continue the public hearing for 3 weeks at least. So community councils could be notified if you go that and we deal with it in a month. Is that a problem for this owner?
Probably not. It has been postponed from a week ago last Tuesday. It was postponed. This work session was announced. I don't know what you think from that, right? From that standpoint.
Okay.
It wouldn't affect us.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Whittleton. Mr. Dyson?
I'm sure I missed this. When was this lot zoned I-2?
With the original area-wide rezones, sometime in the 70s.
70s. So the people that built these subdivisions and the people that bought there knew that zoning was in place. Mr. Whittleton, as usual, makes a very logical case, which is generally not much value in the political process. But the property can be developed. There's no reasonable way. And in fact, telling the people that have owned the land that they can't develop it and that the zoning that was put in place 49 years ago was somehow the other wrong. In our system, we don't have that right to tell an owner they can't do it. And if we did, we'd be subject to huge taking lawsuit when you tell a private property owner and a political subdivision you did wrong. And the owners then would have huge case for a taking thing. That's it. And for you folks that are new here, I'm sure you know that all of us wish that our neighborhood would stay exactly the way it is. And it's called NIMBY. There's another one called Banana, which builds absolutely nothing near anything. And then there's Nope, which is not on planet Earth. It's just a continual battle, and it is a conflict of rights and perceived rights. And but Mr. Welton's logic and the gentleman here is irrefutable in my view.
Thank you, Mr. Dyson.
One last question.
Mr. Peterson and Ms. Zalatow, I think that'll be it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was just going to say that the first lady who testified that lives in the neighborhood said that there was a sign up that said future site for a school. And so that may have been what caused people to buy real estate and build houses in that area.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Ms. Zalata.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since we have Mr. Whitfield here, can you remind me what R2M zoning is in terms of what can and can't be done with it, and maybe why it's R2M there?
So R2M is our duplex, and actually in the R2M you can do a triplex and fourplex, but it's a medium intensity residential district. When the property was rezoned, or when it was zoned, the R2M existed, and what they did is they left that R2M to provide that buffer between the perceived or the future residential neighborhood to the north, buffering it from the industrial that would be occurring to the south. Basically they created a split zoning. Under our old Title 21, split zoning was discouraged. Under our new Title 21, it is outright prohibited. So from the planning department's perspective, this is a cleaning up. This issue would not occur today. It couldn't occur. So by rezoning the property to I-2 and providing that rather large landscaping buffer, we feel like that provides the neighborhood to the north the protections that we think it deserves.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you, Ms. Zalata. Ms. Quinn Davidson.
So I was just kind of perusing the packet here while we're sitting together. So planning and zoning, did they already add landscaping requirements, and then this S version adds additional special limitations? Or did planning and zoning not add any?
No, there were typos in the first ordinance that went out. The S version reflects the recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay, got it. So these aren't things we're adding, they just look new because they weren't in there to begin with?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Quinn Davidson. Okay, I think that is everything. This work session's over.